Are we in the right spot for the webinar? I think we are. We're not.
Welcome. This is Karra Sparks, registered dietitian with UAMS Northwest. We are partnering with DHS to create healthier meals. The title of today's webinar is Identifying Nutrient-Rich Whole Grains to Meet the Meal Pattern Requirement. After the webinar, participants will have knowledge of health risk in childhood in the state of Arkansas, understand why the USDA meal pattern has changed to reflect the current dietary guidelines for Americans, and how to identify credible, whole grain rich foods using one of 4 ways. According to the recent dietary guidelines for Americans, children are eating mainly refined grains. This includes white bread, rolls, bagels, and crackers, pasta, pizza crust, grain-based desserts, refined grain ready-to-eat cereals such as crispy rice cereal, corn and flour tortillas, white rice, and cornbread. Refined grain foods are usually enriched grains. Mixed dishes make up about half of refined grain foods. These foods include pizza, burgers, tacos, macaroni and cheese, and spaghetti with meatballs. Despite the number of nutrients, including dietary fibers supplied by whole grains and the health benefits provided, children are eating below the recommended daily intake. Childhood obesity increased rapidly during the 1980s and 1990s. Although recent data indicates childhood obesity is not increasing and rates have stabilized, Arkansas shows no change in childhood obesity. It is not increasing or decreasing. Overweight or obese preschool-aged children are 5 times more likely to be overweight or obese as adults. Black and Latino children have a higher rate of obesity than do their white peers. Obesity can cause serious health results for children, including high blood pressure and diabetes. Large social and psychological effects can be seen in children that are overweight. Energy balance is eating enough calories and getting enough physical activity for normal growth and maintain a healthy body weight. Child care programs play a key role in the prevention of childhood obesity. Your child care food program can support healthy development in children. An environment that nurtures and promotes healthy habits in children by following healthy meal patterns and exercise activities helps children create healthy habits. The new USDA meal pattern is promoting a greater variety of vegetables and fruit, more whole grains, and less added sugar and saturated fat. The meal patterns helps you to know what portion size to serve from each food group. Healthy activities should be included in program activities such as celebrations. We will review the 2015-2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans. The foundation of the guideline promotes health to lower the risk of chronic disease by consuming a variety of nutrient-dense foods and physical activity. The changes made to the USDA meal patterns are based on the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. The new meal patterns went into effect October 1st, 2017. We will talk more about ways to increase whole grain foods to meet the meal pattern for children using the guidelines. Children need no more than 1,500 to 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day, depending on how old they are. American children and adolescents are eating foods high in sodium that far exceed the daily recommended limit. Eating foods higher in sodium is associated with higher blood pressure. Eating lower sodium foods can lower blood pressure somewhat in children. Lower blood pressure during childhood can lower the risk for high blood pressure as an adult. Taste preferences for high sodium foods is developed when children are offered high sodium foods. When children eat low sodium foods, then low sodium foods are preferred. An eating pattern high in sodium can increase blood volume by pulling water into the bloodstream, while an eating pattern high in potassium can lower blood pressure by reducing harmful effects of sodium on blood pressure. Whole wheat has 3 times more potassium than enriched wheat. The 2015-2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans has 5 guidelines. The overall guideline encourages healthy eating patterns to reduce the risk of chronic disease. Individuals will need to change their food and beverage choices to make a healthy pattern. Everyone has a role in helping to create and support healthy eating patterns. Cultural and traditional preferences should be included across all food groups when making meal patterns. An eating pattern is a combination of foods and beverages that is eaten over time. The USDA food pattern is an example. Nutrient-dense foods and beverages provide vitamins and minerals and other beneficial substances that have positive health effects. Offering many different foods and beverages over a week creates a meal pattern with variety. The key recommendations give more information on how to follow the 5 guidelines for individuals. A healthy eating pattern includes a variety of vegetables, including dark green, red, and orange, legumes, beans and peas, starchy and other. Fruits, mainly whole fruit, grains, half whole grains, fat-free or low-fat dairy, including milk, yogurt, cheese, and/or soy beverages. Variety of protein foods, including seafood, lean meats, and poultry, eggs, legumes, beans and peas, nuts, seeds, soy products, and oils. A healthy eating pattern limits saturated fats and trans fats, added sugars, and sodium. Consume less than 10% of calories per day from added sugars and saturated fats. Consume less than 2,300 milligrams per day of sodium. These limits can help individuals make healthy eating patterns within calorie limits. All Americans should be meeting the physical activity guidelines for Americans to help promote health and reduce the risk of chronic disease. Several of the top 10 food sources of sodium come from grain foods and mixed grain foods. Refined grain foods, especially grain-based desserts, generally are higher in these nutrients. Grain-based desserts can also provide extra unneeded calories. The health benefits of eating whole grains has been shown in multiple studies. These benefits are better weight maintenance, reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, and reduced risk of heart disease and stroke, and other benefits. The new grain requirements became effective October 1st for children and adults participating in the Child and Adult Care Food Program. This requirement is not for infants. The updated CACFP meal patterns require at least 1 serving of a whole grain rich food be served daily. The facility can serve the whole grain rich food at any meal or snack. The best practice for the CACFPs from the USDA is to provide 2 servings of whole grain rich foods per day. This will increase the nutritional quality of meals served. Due to added sugars and saturated fats found in grain-based desserts, these foods will no longer count for the grain requirement. Grain-based desserts are cake, brownies, cookies, sweet pie crust, donuts, cereal bars, breakfast bars, granola bars, sweet rolls, and toaster pastries. Centers and daycare homes cannot claim a grain-based dessert as a meal component. Each dry ounce of breakfast cereal should have no more than 6 grams of sugar. We will talk about each of these grain requirements in detail. By offering more whole grain rich foods throughout the day, the children you serve will receive more nutrients. There are benefits to eating whole grains for children. Research indicates children who eat whole grains at breakfast are related to higher reading scores, fluency in math. Whole grains have more protein than refined grains. Kids need more protein to grow and maintain muscles. There are many beneficial nutrients for children in whole wheat compared to enriched wheat. Some of the nutrients include fiber, potassium, zinc, and iron. Fiber keeps kids full and focused during school. Fiber also supports a healthy and regular digestive system. Potassium helps nerves and muscles function. Zinc keeps the immune system working strong and helps kids grow and develop. As children's iron stores begin to deplete, children need iron in their diet to maintain a sufficient amount. A whole grain has its 3 original parts: the bran, germ, and endosperm. If a grain is missing any of its original parts, it is a refined grain like white flour or white rice. Enriched grains have some of the nutrients added back. When you are choosing a whole grain rich food, find the ingredient list. Whole grain will be listed as the first ingredient or second after water. The food may be 50% whole grains with other grains. Whole grain rich foods do not have to be more expensive and can be added without affecting your budget. Affordable whole grain rich foods include brown rice, whole grain pretzels, whole grain crackers, whole grain cereal, oatmeal, and whole grain granola. Serve inexpensive whole grain rich foods daily to meet the whole grain requirement. The children in your program will benefit. Choose at least one of the 4 ways to identify a food as whole grain rich. Labeled 100% whole grain or 100% whole wheat. Ingredient list, the rule of 3, FDA health claim, or a child nutrition label of a product formulation statement. If the label on a food item says 100% whole wheat or 100% whole grain, the item is whole grain rich. Reading labels carefully will help you to know if a product qualifies as whole grain rich. Many products are labeled with words that can be confusing. Food items that may not be whole grain include words like 100% wheat, multigrain, 7-grain, cracked wheat, or stone ground. 100% wheat only tells you the bread was made from a wheat kernel. A food item with a label may contain some whole wheat flour or may only contain refined flour. A bread is only whole grain if you see the words 100% whole wheat or 100% whole grain on the label. Multigrain or 7-grain bread means the bread contains more than one type of grain. They were made from refined grains, whole grains, or both. Cracked wheat is a whole grain. A bread labeled cracked wheat may be made with more refined grain than cracked wheat. Stone ground is the way the flour or meal was processed. To make sure a product is whole grain, look for the word whole along with stone ground in the ingredients list. Some foods can have caramel coloring or molasses added to make the bread brown. This does not mean the bread was made from whole grains. You may have seen the whole grain stamp on food packages. The Whole Grains Council has 3 stamp manufacturers can use on products. The stamp tells you the amount of whole grains in a product. The stamp does not tell you if the other grains in the product are enriched. A food item can have a whole grain stamp on the package and contain a large amount of refined flour that is not enriched. Refined flour does not count as a credible grain. Some whole grains are whole wheat, brown rice, wild rice, oatmeal, bulgur, whole grain, corn, and quinoa. Vitamins and minerals are lost during processing. When a refined grain like wheat, rice, and corn has certain vitamins and minerals added, it is considered an enriched grain. Cereal, pasta, and bread are food items that contain enriched grains. Nutrients added include B vitamins, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, folic acid, and iron. For a food item to be a credible grain component, the first ingredient or second after water must be whole or enriched. If the food has two more grain ingredients, they must be whole or enriched grains, bran, or germ. If the food ingredient list states 2% or less of an ingredient, these ingredients should not count towards the rule of 3. In this example, the first ingredient after water is whole grain. The second grain ingredient is enriched, and the third grain ingredient is whole grain. This bread product meets the rule of 3. Diets rich in whole grain foods and other plant foods and low in total fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol may reduce the risk of heart disease and some cancers. Diets rich in whole grain foods and other plant foods and low in saturated fat and cholesterol may reduce the risk of heart disease. A food item with one of these statements meets the Food and Drug Administration's whole grain health claim. The food item will have at least 51% whole grains. Child nutrition labels are for main dish entrees that contribute to the meat alternates component of the USDA meal patterns. The USDA's child nutrition label is the documentation needed for a combination food like breaded chicken patties. The grain portion must be whole or enriched grains on the mixed product ingredient list. The grain portion is part of a main dish entree that contributes to the meat alternates component. The term ounce equivalent grains on the child nutrition label is another way to know the food item meets the whole grain rich criteria. A child nutrition label found on food packaging always has the CN logo border, meal pattern contribution statement. In the upper right-hand corner of a CN label, a 6-digit product identification number appears. This number is assigned by the USDA Food and Nutrition Service. Statement and authorization by the Food and Nutrition Service, month and year of final approval by the Food and Nutrition Service. Whole grain is not listed as the first ingredient or second after water. When a food item has many whole grain ingredients but is not listed as the first ingredient, the food can be whole grain rich if the combined weight of the whole grains is more than the weight of the other ingredients. For example, a bread with several different grain ingredients, enriched flour, 40% of grain weight, whole wheat flour, 30% of grain weight, and whole oats, 30% of grain weight. The whole wheat flour and whole oats added up to be more weight than the weight of the enriched flour. Therefore, this is a whole grain rich bread. These 3 grain ingredients meet the rule of 3 credible grains. A manufacturer's product formulation statement is the information needed to document that this product has more whole grain by weight. A manufacturer's product formulation statement is needed for commercially prepared combination food items. The food item can only be credited when the specific content is documented. A PFS signed by an official manufacturer is one acceptable documentation. Whole grain rich criteria practice rule of 3. Let's practice looking at ingredient lists to see if we can identify a food as whole grain rich and credit as a grains component in the CACFP. This blueberry muffin ingredient list indicates whole wheat flour as the first whole grain, with enriched flour being the second grain. Oat fiber, modified food starch, and wheat starch are grains listed after contains 2% or less of. These grains do not count towards the rule of 3. This blueberry muffin credits as whole grain rich. Unbleached enriched flour is the first ingredient after water in this oat bread. Whole wheat flour is the second grain ingredient, and whole oats is the third grain ingredient. This oat bread meets the rule of 3 and credits in the CACFP meal pattern. For this oat bread to count towards The whole grain requirement, a PFS from the manufacturer, is needed to document the amount of whole wheat and whole oats by weight for this product to be credited as whole grain rich. This ingredient list is the grains component for this combination food, cheese ravioli. The cheese filling is a meat alternates component. The first ingredient in the pasta ingredients is whole wheat flour. The second grain ingredient is enriched durum wheat flour. There are no other grain ingredients. This cheese ravioli meets the rule of 3 and credits as whole grain rich. This cheese ravioli contains durum wheat. In the grains component of this combination food, this cheese ravioli does not credit for the grain component. The ingredient list on these sun chips indicates a whole grain for the first ingredient, whole grain for the second and third grain ingredient. These sun chips meet the rule of 3 and are whole grain rich. This product, Veggie Straws, contains potato starch, potato flour, and cornstarch. All 3 of these grains are non-credible and do not meet the rule of 3. These Veggie Straws are not credible. The first ingredient is whole wheat flour for this hot dog bun. This food item meets the whole grain rich requirement. The ingredient list on these white whole wheat breadsticks show the first ingredient after water as being whole grain. The second grain is enriched. The third grain is modified food starch. Modified food starch is not a credible grain. These white whole wheat breadsticks do not meet the rule of 3 and do not count as whole grain rich. This product is not credible. This cereal, Frosted Mini Spooners, contains whole grain wheat as the first ingredient. This product meets the whole grain requirement and credits in the CACFP. This cereal is WIC approved. The ingredient list on these frosted flakes show the first ingredient as milled corn. This cereal does not meet the whole grain requirement. The new meal requirement does not allow a grain-based dessert to be served as a credible component. Grain-based desserts contain added sugars and saturated fat. Centers and daycare homes can serve grain-based desserts as an additional food item, although these food items are not reimbursable. These grain-based desserts have added sugar. They are not credible as the grain component in meals and snacks. If a grain-based dessert is homemade from healthy ingredients or whole grain rich, it still cannot count toward the grain component. It is considered a grain-based dessert. These foods are credible grain items and count toward the grain requirement. All breakfast cereals, either ready to eat or cooked, must be whole grain, enriched, or fortified. A ready-to-eat breakfast cereal with the first ingredient whole grain and it is fortified. It qualifies as whole grain rich. Fortified ready-to-eat breakfast cereals do not need to meet the rule of 3. Credible breakfast cereals are identified in one of these 2 ways. Approved WIC breakfast cereal list can be used. All breakfast cereals ready to eat and instant or regular hot cereal must contain no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce to be credible. You can use the nutrition facts panel to decide if the cereal is within the sugar limits. Step 1, write down the number of grams of sugar. Step 2, find the serving size of cereal located at the top of the nutrition facts panel and write down the number of grams. Divide the grams of sugar by the serving size in grams. And then step 4, the cereal is credible if the sugar limit is 0.212 or less. Breakfast cereals can be fortified. A breakfast cereal that has been fortified contains the 5 enrichment nutrients and other vitamins and minerals. These vitamins and minerals are not naturally found in grains. How many nutrients are added to a cereal is decided by the manufacturer. The ingredient list of a fortified cereal will contain the enrichment nutrients plus additional nutrients. In order to ensure compliance with the whole grain rich requirement, CACFP centers and daycare homes must document on their menu and production records when a grain is whole grain rich. Document whole grain rich items on the meal production record and menus by noting whole grain rich in front of a food item, such as whole grain rich English muffins, or the initials WG Muffin is acceptable. For example, a menu may say peanut butter and jelly sandwich on whole grain rich bread, whole wheat pasta and chicken, or brown rice and vegetables. Other whole grain foods that do not use the word whole in their description, such as brown rice flour, wild rice, quinoa, millet, triticale, teff, amaranth, buckwheat, and sorghum. Today we have learned how to add whole grain rich foods to meet the new USDA meal pattern requirement. To recap what we talked about today, you must serve one whole grain food item at a meal or snack each day. The new meal pattern requirements are for children and adults, not infants. Cereal requirements are no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce, or any cereal that is WIC approved meets the requirement. The Whole Grains Council has created a whole grain train song. The Whole Grain Train supports healthy eating in a fun way. The song can teach your kids the names of different whole grains. They will also learn about whole grain foods to eat. The Whole Grain Train song is perfect for preschool age children to sing. You can find academic lessons to go with the Whole Grain Train song at the Whole Grains Council website. And if anyone has any questions, go ahead and type those questions into the chat box.
I have a question.
Okay.
Where can you get copies of these slides?
We will make those available. We will send those out.
Okay.
And this
so how do you know who to send them to?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is also will be recorded.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Pancakes and waffles with fruit is fine. On the white whole wheat breadsticks, the ingredient list on those showed the first ingredient after water as being whole grain, the second grain is enriched, and the third grain was modified food starch. And modified food starch is not a credible grain. So they do not meet the rule of 3 and do not count as whole grain rich. Yes, that is correct. If one of the grains is not whole grain or enriched, it does not meet the rule of 3. Thank you for attending. If you want to receive credit for this webinar, please email vkrowe@uams.edu. Please include the code word GRAIN and your DHS agreement number and name in the email. If you have other questions, we will address those via email. Thank you.
Can you type in the website for us that we need to email to for credit?
You should be seeing that right now.
Can you post the email one more time? It was up too quick for me to get it all.
Thank you very much for your time with the webinar today, and we will follow up with any other questions via email. Thank you.